The playground was alive with children's laughter, but one little girl sat in silence, her small body swaying gently on a swing, as though the world around her no longer reached her. For 3 long years, she hadn't spoken a single word. To her mother, Caroline Miller, each passing day felt like an echo of hopelessness, until a stranger walked into their morning and changed everything. Caroline had tried everything. Doctors, therapists, specialists, all had promised progress. Yet her daughter Lily remained locked inside her quiet world since the accident. That Saturday, Caroline brought her to the park more out of desperation than routine. Lily's hands loosely clutched the swings chains, her eyes following the other children, but never joining their games. Caroline sat on the bench nearby, pretending to scroll through her phone while fighting the sting of pitying stares. That was when she noticed him. A man in his mid-30s, rugged yet unpretentious, wearing a faded gray hoodie and jeans that told of years, not trends. His deep, unforced laugh carried across the playground as he pushed his young son on a tire swing. The boy's carefree giggles stirred something inside Carolinia memory of the sound she missed most, Lily's voice. When the swing slowed, the man caught Caroline's gaze. Most strangers turned away when they noticed Lily's blank expression, but he didn't. Instead, he walked toward them with his son trailing behind. Kneeling down to Lily's eye level, he simply said in a voice warm and patient, "Mind if we say hi?" Caroline froze. Something in his calm presence hinted that this moment, unlike the others, would not end in silence. Caroline opened her mouth to intervene to rescue Lily from the awkwardness she knew was coming, but something in the man's demeanor made her pause. He didn't rush. He didn't push. He simply waited, as if silence itself was a language he already understood. Extending his hand palm open, he let Lily decide. For a long moment, the little girl only stared at it. Then slowly she placed her small hand in his. The man's smile deepened, not triumphant, but gentle, like he had been expecting this all along. Caroline's heart pounded. Strangers never lingered when faced with Lily's silence, but this man did. He leaned closer, his voice low and conspiratorial, as though sharing a secret only Lily could hear. "You know," he said, nodding toward the tall slide, "my son told me that ride is only for the bravest kids. But I think he's wrong. I've met braver." Lily's lips parted slightly, her eyes wide with hesitation. Caroline held her breath. The man lifted a finger to gently tap the tip of her chin, then waited again, giving Lily all the space she needed. And then, like a whisper, breaking through years of heavy silence, came a single word, fragile, yet crystal clear. "How?" The sound hit Caroline like a thunderclap. Her throat tightened, her chest heaving as if she hadn't breathed in years. She froze, stunned beyond words. After 3 years of quiet, her daughter had spoken. Not in a sterile doctor's office, not in therapy, but here in the open air to a man they had only just met. And the man didn't flinch. He didn't gasp or call attention to it. He simply smiled, steady and sure, answering softly, because brave kids don't need to be the loudest. They just speak when it matters. Caroline's eyes burned as she realized she was watching the impossible unfold. Her daughter had just spoken, and it was only the beginning. Caroline could hardly believe her ears. That single whispered word still echoed in her chest, fragile, yet powerful enough to break 3 years of silence. She watched frozen as Lily's fingers tightened around the swing chains, her eyes fixed on the man who had so effortlessly reached her. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone steady like a friend rather than a stranger. Lily's lips trembled as if the words were climbing uphill inside her, but then almost painfully slow she breathed them out. "Lily." Caroline's knees nearly buckled. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, afraid to make a sound that might shatter the miracle happening before her. The man's eyes softened. "That's a beautiful name," he said, motioning to his son beside him. "And this is Daniel." The boy, tousle-haired and shy, gave a quick little wave. For the first time in years, Lily looked directly at another child. She hesitated, then whispered, "Hi." Daniel grinned the innocence of his smile, unbothered by her quiet tone. "Want to see the secret slide?" he asked. Caroline's heart squeezed. She had never seen her daughter look so curious, so alive. Lily glanced at her mother for reassurance, and Caroline, tears blurring her vision, managed a nod. "Go ahead, sweetheart." The man didn't hover or pull Lily along. Instead, he walked beside her, letting her set her own pace while Daniel darted ahead, pointing excitedly toward the sandbox. Caroline remained on the bench, her hands shaking as the sound of Lily's laughter floated back to her. It was faint, unsteady, but real. She pressed her palms over her face, her body trembling as relief washed through her. For years, she had begged, pleaded, and prayed to hear her daughter's voice again. And now, in the simplest of moments with a complete stranger, that prayer had been answered. Caroline didn't know who this man was, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: he had just given her back her little girl. When Lily and Daniel returned from the hidden slide, their cheeks were flushed, their eyes bright with an innocence Caroline had almost forgotten existed. Lily climbed back onto the swing, her lips curved into a shy but genuine smile. Caroline felt her heart unravel. She couldn't let this moment end without knowing who this man was. "Wait!" she called, her voice unsteady, as he began to guide Daniel away. He turned, his expression calm, almost cautious. Caroline stood from the bench, her throat tightening as words tumbled out. "Would you maybe join us for coffee? My treat! Her voice broke. I haven't heard her speak in 3 years. The man's jaw flexed, something flickering in his eyes, a shadow of hesitation. He glanced at Daniel, then back at Caroline. "We don't usually do coffee shops," he said carefully. "But there's a little diner on Maple Street. It's quiet." Caroline nodded too quickly, her relief evident. "Perfect. Well, follow you." 15 minutes later, the three of them slid into a retro red booth inside the small-town diner, the smell of fresh pie lingering in the air. Lily leaned forward, eagerly whispering something to Daniel, and for the first time in years, Caroline sat back and simply listened to her daughter speak. The man who finally introduced himself as Mark ordered only black coffee. Caroline couldn't help but notice the details, the scarred hands, the faint limp when he shifted in his seat, the distant look in his eyes that carried stories untold. "How did you know what to say to her?" she asked softly. Mark's gaze lowered to his cup. His voice was quiet, heavy with memory. "My sister stopped talking when we were kids after our dad left. Everyone thought she was broken. But she wasn't. She just didn't trust people anymore." He paused, glancing at Lily with a faint, almost bittersweet smile. "Kids don't need fixing. They just need someone they can trust." Caroline felt her chest tighten. She realized then that this wasn't coincidence. This man hadn't just reached Lily, he understood her. And maybe, just maybe, fate had brought them together for a reason. Caroline studied Mark across the table, her eyes drawn to the small details, the way his sleeve shifted just enough to reveal a faded hospital band around his wrist, the way he carried himself with quiet strength, but also with a weight he couldn't quite hide. "Were you recently in the hospital?" she asked gently. For a moment, Mark didn't answer. He traced the rim of his coffee cup, his jaw tightening. Finally, his voice came low, steady, but carrying years of pain. "I was a paramedic in the Army. 2 tours in Afghanistan. On my last run, we hit an IED. My leg took most of it. My best friend didn't make it." Caroline's chest constricted. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Mark gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging the sympathy but not dwelling on it. "After that, I couldn't handle the noises, sirens, crowds, even the TV. Mason and we moved to the edge of town. I started volunteering at parks, helping kids feel safe again. Truth is, his lips quirked faintly. It helps me too. Caroline glanced toward Lily, who was giggling. As Daniel made a whipped cream mustache on his upper lip, the sound of her daughter's laughter, so natural, so unguarded, struck her like sunlight breaking through years of storm. "That's not selfish," Caroline said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "That's extraordinary." Mark looked at her, then really looked, his eyes raw and unguarded. "Most people don't think so. My RSU meme is just scars and blank years. No company wants the guy with a limp and too much silence in his past." Caroline hesitated, torn between the professional distance she always kept and the overwhelming gratitude swelling in her chest. She wasn't just a mother, she was the CEO of a leading healthcare tech firm. And as she looked at Mark, she knew with startling clarity technology could never replace what he carried inside him, the ability to reach people in ways no machine ever could. At that moment, Caroline realized she wasn't just sitting across from a stranger. She was sitting across from the man who had given her back her daughter's voice. The following morning, Caroline awoke to a sound she hadn't heard in years. At first, she thought it was a dream, the soft, tuneful hum drifting from Lily's room. Not words, not full sentences, but a melody fragile and sweet. Caroline sat on the edge of her bed, her eyes brimming with tears, listening as her daughter filled the silence that had haunted their home for so long. By mid-morning, they were back at the playground. The autumn sun filtered through the trees, painting golden streaks across the grass. Mark and his son Daniel were already there, tossing a worn football back and forth. Lily didn't hesitate. She ran forward, her voice ringing out across the park. "Daniel, throw it to me!" Caroline froze, her heart swelling at the simple, ordinary sound, her daughter shouting, laughing, living. She walked slowly to the fence, where Mark leaned, watching the children play. For a long moment, they stood in silence, both of them gazing at Lily as she caught the ball, her laughter mingling with Daniel's. "You have no idea what this means to me," Caroline finally whispered. Mark turned his brow, furrowing softly. "I think I do," he said. "I've seen what it looks like when the light comes back on in someone's eyes." Caroline swallowed hard, her throat thick with gratitude. It wasn't just that Lily had found her voice again. It was that she'd found joy connection, a spark of the childhood that had been stolen from her. And it was Mark who had unlocked it, not with training or therapy, but with patience, kindness, and an understanding born of his own pain. As Lily's laughter carried through the air, Caroline realized this was more than a chance encounter. This was the beginning of a new chapter for her daughter, and perhaps for all of them. Caroline stood at the fence, her eyes fixed on Lily as she darted across the playground with Daniel. Every shout, every laugh that left her daughter's lips felt like a miracle one that only a day ago she would have thought impossible. She turned to Mark, studying the quiet strength in his posture, the way he leaned against the railing with the ease of a man who carried invisible battles yet still found peace in this small moment. "You don't realize what you've done," Caroline said softly. Mark kept his eyes on the kids. "I'm just glad she feels safe enough to speak again." "No," Caroline insisted, her voice firmer. "You didn't just make her speak. You gave her back her life." He shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the weight of her words. "I didn't do anything special. Kids, they know who they can trust. Lily just needed someone to ask in the right way." Caroline fell silent, but her mind was racing. She wasn't just a mother desperate for her daughter's voice. She was the CEO of one of the country's most innovative healthcare tech companies. For years, her team had been developing devices to help people with speech impairments, building tools that translated silence into communication. But sitting here watching Lily respond to Mark, she realized what their machines could never replicate: genuine human connection. "Mark," she said, turning to face him fully, "I run a company that designs communication devices. But lately I've been wondering if technology alone is enough. What you have, it can't be coded into a machine. It can't be taught in a classroom. He glanced at her, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I want to hire you," Caroline said without hesitation. "Not as charity, not as pity, but because you understand something my entire team has missed. You know how to reach people when nothing else can." Mark let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "You'd put your name, your company on someone like me? A washed-up medic with a limp and a RSM full of hospital stays." Caroline's gaze didn't waver. "I'd put my company on someone exactly like you." For a long moment he said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then Daniel's laughter rang out, followed by Lily's bright, unguarded voice calling, "Throw it again!" Mark's eyes softened his defenses, breaking just slightly as he looked at his son, and then at Lily. "You're serious," he murmured. "I've never been more serious," Caroline replied. Mark inhaled slowly, his shoulders easing, as though a weight he'd carried for years had finally shifted. "All right," he said at last, his voice low but certain. "But only if you let me buy the first round of coffee when I get my first paycheck." Caroline laughed, and for the first time in years, it felt unburdened, real, and full of hope. As the children's voices carried across the playground, she knew this wasn't just the start of a new job. For Mark, it was the start of healing for all of them. The weeks that followed brought changes Caroline never could have imagined. Lily was no longer the silent shadow on the playground. She was laughing, asking questions, and running alongside Daniel as though she had never lost her voice. Every morning, Caroline woke to the sound of her daughter humming, sometimes even chattering to herself as she played. It was music more beautiful than anything she had ever known. Mark joined Caroline's company not as a technician or programmer, but as something far more valuable, a guide. He taught her team what no textbook or device could capture: the art of listening, the power of patience, and the importance of trust. Slowly, Caroline saw not only her daughter flourish, but also her company transform. The work they were doing was no longer just about technology. It was about people, about creating bridges where silence once stood. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the park, Caroline stood watching Lily and Daniel chase fireflies. Mark leaned beside her, quiet as always, until he spoke with a smile. "Looks like she found her voice again." Caroline nodded, her eyes wet. "And maybe we all did." Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs don't come from science, wealth, or power. They come from kindness, patience, and the courage to simply listen. The right words spoken at the right time can unlock doors we thought were sealed forever. What about you? Have you ever witnessed a moment when compassion changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. Together, let's spread hope and remind the world that sometimes miracles come in the quietest whispers.